Hello and welcome to a special episode of Table Talk. Now, normally on this show, I chat with other creators in the TTRPG space about how they run their tables, but this time I have a guest who breaks that formula a little bit. I'm Danger Dangers, the GM and host of D&Dark, and joining us at the table today is a creator who relates to the other half of D&Dark, the host of the Monster Archives podcast and of the Universal Studios Monsters Instagram page, Ian the Wolfman. Hello!
How's it going, guys? Man, I'm really excited to do this. You know, I did a little research into what you guys are doing, and I think that's really, really cool. I love the creativity behind it all. It's different in like the best way possible. So really, really killer stuff that you guys are doing.
I appreciate that. It's a fun way for us to kind of collectively explore our love of these characters and these monsters. But to bring it back around to you, can you please tell us a little bit about the projects that you're involved in, who you are, and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, professionally, I'm known as Ian the Wolfman. The title kind of came out of my love for the Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr., 1941 movie. And it's a character that I really identify with. I am a lifelong, and I mean lifelong, Universal monster fan. Probably one of my first true experiences with the Universal monsters. It had to be the Burger King action figures.
Yep.
Yeah, there's four of them, and you get them at the kids' meal. But the monsters were everywhere in the 90s. Like there was that massive resurgence. The classic collection VHS tapes. There was the Pepsi and the Frito-Lay ad campaigns, and even Miller Lite. It was just everywhere. That resurgence kind of took off in 1991 specifically because it was like that was the 60th anniversary of Dracula and Frankenstein. But I took the Wolfman mantra. I love Lon Chaney and I love Jack Pierce's makeup. He has this like really unique characterization. He's depressed and he just wants to die and he doesn't want to hurt people. And it's just this like really rich, real, I think emotional character. And, growing up, I kind of struggled with mental health and depression at times. So that kind of is where, in a realistic way, it's like this personification of the darker side of your life. And I think I just really identified with it and I'm doing great today. But it's something that, I'm passionate about. I think it's cool you can talk about these things and, and the stigma. I think it's healthy to talk about it. So, it's fun and it's real and it's the Wolfman. And that's where I got the name from. So
I do think he is a very underappreciated member of the Monster Suite. I really love the way that he gets characterized, especially in the subsequent movies.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. It's the sequels where you really get the richness of like who he is and, the curse that he's dealing with. The first film, it's just kind of the introduction. And it's funny, Chaney Jr. was the only actor to play the Wolfman. He wouldn't let anyone else play it. And it's just like the other monsters were kind of interacting with him. Frankenstein meets a Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. He's the core of those movies, which is really, really fascinating, I think. He was the big draw for Universal in the 40s, where Karloff and Lugosi were kind of bench warmers, unfortunately. But yeah, it's interesting to say the least.
So, you host a podcast called The Monster Archives that goes into the history of these films and characters. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So The Monster Archives, it premiered earlier this year. I'm in the middle of season 2. It's kind of on hiatus right now. Professionally, I'm a FedEx manager and driver by day and a Wolfman by night. So I'm marching towards busy season. So I kind of bit off a little more than I could chew because it probably takes like 12 to 14 hours each episode. Like I'm researching, writing, editing, recording, so it's a lot of work.
It is no small feat.
Yeah. It's a ton and I love it, but I'm doing it in seasonal increments. I wanted season 2 to come out in the fall, like for Halloween. So I'd finished the first 5 of 10 episodes for season 2, and that's out there. It'll probably be January, I'm thinking, before the second half gets out. And then season 3 will be in the springtime. But to back up just a little bit, I started the Instagram account just on a whim back in summer of 2019. And Shout Factory released the first volume of what they called the Universal Horror Collection on Blu-ray. It was all the Lugosi and Karloff pairings outside of like the typical monster movies. So it was like the Black Cat and the Raven, Black Friday, and the Invisible Ray. First time ever on high def. And I was like, oh, I hadn't seen any of them. So just kind of on a whim, like I was like, I really want to watch all of these films in order of release. So I started with The Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1923, silent classic. And I started like writing little mini reviews and posting them on my personal Instagram. And I'd get like 2 or 3 likes. And I was like, man, like I want an audience. I want to be able to share this passion. So I was just talking to a friend of mine and he was like, well, why don't you just start your own Instagram for that? I was like, oh, duh. So I just booted up Instagram and I just typed in at Universal Studios Monsters. Green check. Couldn't believe it. What are the odds? So that was like in June 2019. I started that account and it just grew. Like, and all I was doing was share some reviews, share some pictures, share some history, started, sharing my collection, just stuff like that. And it just grew and grew and grew. I met other amazing people and had some really, really cool opportunities just to do things. I'd been toying with the idea, like not long after starting the account, to do a podcast. And ideally what I wanted to do was watch the films, do audio commentary essentially, and share behind the scenes history and all that sort of, you just combine all of it. It was just like, maybe one day the opportunity will present itself. So I think it was 2021. There was these 2 guys that reached out, Jim Towns and Scott Kelly. They are hosts of the Borgo Pass horror podcast. And if you guys listening haven't checked that one out, it's outstanding. It's exactly what I described. It's 2 guys watching the movies, doing commentary. And I've been a guest 4 times. It's been, running ever since. They're some great guys. I just needed to give them a shout out because we just recorded an episode. It came out on Halloween, and it's the old Dark House. So I got to be a guest on that one. So I held off doing what I wanted to do because I was like, oh, these guys are doing essentially what I envisioned. So I was like, I got to figure out a way. I got to do something different. And no one was doing like strictly history. And I knew that was kind of floating around in my head. And I was like, if I do it in a, documentary style, I knew it was going to be a ton of work. But I figured out what I wanted to do. And I kind of took some inspiration from Lore. That's Aaron Mankey's podcast. And then I just found as many books from writers like David J. Schall, Gregory Menk, Tom Weaver, these great like 70s, 80s, 90s monster historians. And that's where we get like all these great documentaries and stuff. All the real deep cut information that we have on the movies from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s came from those guys, from interviewing the people that were still alive in the 60s and 70s. So I have these, giant tomes that these guys have written. And that's, I'd say that's my Bible for the monster archives. I found some other cool stuff elsewhere, but I owe everything that the Monster Archives is to those guys. So the Monster Archives premiered its first season like back in June. I did it on the 5th anniversary, like of me starting the Instagram account. So like the first handful of episodes, it's kind of the history of film, the earliest horror films, like the novels themselves that like inspired the Universal Monsters. And then I go into the silent era. And season 2, I'm finally hitting like the talkie era. It's just going to get bigger and better, and I foresee 20 to 25 seasons. Like there's so much history, man. It's wild.
It's a really extensive field and category, and I'm sure you've noticed this firsthand from starting your Instagram, but the people who are fans of the classic horror monsters, there is a passion for them that is very hard to find in other fields and other topics. The people who like these monsters love these monsters, and it is very important to them. And there's just a lot to talk about in the way that they're adapted, the different messages that they tell, how they speak to society at different points in time. It's a thing that I also share a big passion for, and it's a big part of why I did D&Dark. I kind of stumbled into that. It was a series of things that all kind of culminated, but I've always had a big fascination with the classic monster suite. For me personally, the Frankenstein monster has always been the one that is the most near and dear to me. It's kind of shifted and changed a little bit with time, especially doing D&Dark. I've gotten a slightly different perspective on all of these monsters and all of these characters. And I would say for me, in kind of the way that you've latched on to the Wolfman, this will probably come as no surprise to any of the D&Dark listeners who are caught up to a certain extent. But for me, the one that speaks to me the most now, and that I would kind of set my anchor point on, is Renfield.
Interesting.
I've always kind of felt with the Dracula stories that Renfield specifically is the scariest part of any Dracula story, because so much of Dracula's menace and threat comes from seeing the effect that he has on this seemingly ordinary person, sent into a complete spiral and breakdown from his mere influence. And I've just always been fascinated by it, and I feel like Dwight Frye is one of the unsung heroes of those movies. He delivers such a compelling and stellar performance in the 31 Dracula film. Yes, Bela Lugosi had a really good charm and a really strong presence and helped really define and make this monster an icon. But to me, Renfield is the image that's stuck in my head. That one image of him at the bottom of the stairs coming off of the boat. That's the thing that imprinted in my head.
That's chilling. Yeah, I absolutely love that. It's Dwight Frye is like the unsung hero. He wasn't overly enthusiastic about them, but much like Lugosi, they took every role just so serious, where a lot of the other actors and actresses, it was just, oh, well, here's work that I'm contractually obligated to do. That's the way Hollywood worked at the time. Like, you were contracted for X amount of films, and if whoever was in charge came to you and said, hey, this is what you're doing, you had to go do it. So I know Dwight Frye was passionate about comedy. That's what he wanted to do, like sing and dance and do some slapstick stuff. But I think that served his performances. He took the zaniness and the craziness serious, where I feel like a lot of the other actors at the time wouldn't have leaned into it. He was almost a method actor. And I mean, Renfield far and away sticks out. You know, he was Fritz as well, and Frankenstein. But yeah, like you said, so many people have that image of, you know, him down at the bottom of the boat laughing and, you know, oh, look at his eyes. Why, the man's gone crazy. That's what they say. And the laugh, like, he's like a proto Joker almost. So I love that you latched on to Renfield. And it's interesting that Dwight Frye's role made such an impact that we got, you know, the movie a couple years ago with Nicholas Hoult and Nick Cage. Like, Renfield is an icon, and rightfully so. So I love that. That's really cool.
So I imagine the answer, like you've already kind of touched upon it a little bit, and the answer to this is pretty obvious with your moniker being Ian the Wolfman. But are there any other particular characters or properties that are special and meaningful to you above the others?
Frankenstein's monster for sure. I think I latched on the Wolfman late teens, really. Before that, I'd definitely say far and away Frankenstein's monster. He has this, especially Karloff's, he has this innocence about him where kids latch onto him. I mean, you see it in the first film with Little Maria. And the day they went to film the scene, you know, at the lake, they had to drive like an hour north to this lake. And, you know, people were concerned and she was going to be scared of Karloff. And, you know, they had like a line of cars out on the back lot. And she walks right up to Karloff in full makeup and says, "Excuse me, can I ride with you?" And he was like, you know, I'd be delighted. And they rode the whole way. So
it's just so precious.
Yeah, exactly. And like, Karloff fought with James Whale that day, like to change the script, where he was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to throw her in. And James Whale kind of like, he was pissed because other people started to chime in and say like, maybe Karloff's right. Like maybe we should change it. And James Whale got his payback by making Karloff carry Colin Clive up the hill to the windmill like 67 times or something like that. And Karloff screwed his back up for life. I know I'm on a tangent. Anyway, the kids have always just been fascinated by this jolly green giant, even though he's a monster. And so that was very much like my sort of reaction. Like I remember it vividly. I was 3 or 4 years old and I just happened to see a photo. I was just, with my parents, like played 20 questions, just absolutely fascinated by who is this? What is this? Like, so that's really where it started for me. So I'd say very much like Frankenstein's monster, but I'd say now outside of the Wolfman, I'm obsessed with Lugosi's Dracula. Your interest ebb and flow. I mean, another one that's just, you can't take your eyes off of him is Claude Rains and The Invisible Man. Like, just unhinged. He's another one that was his first movie role, essentially. Like, he was a stage actor and James Whale knew him. And he had a falling out with Karloff. Karloff was originally planned to be the Invisible Man, and glad they're falling out, because if it hadn't happened, we wouldn't have gotten Claude Rains. And Claude Rains,
he's so sinister.
Yes, he is the most vile, twisted, evil, just delights in the tyranny. That role inspired Mark Hamill's Joker. It's just wild. The years and decades after these films, the effect they have on pop culture and stuff. It's absolutely insane. I'd say it's not a Universal film. The only other 30s villain that has that same twisted glee is Charles Laughton in Island of Lost Souls. He plays Dr. Moreau. There's a glint in his eye. And I'd say like far and away, my top 3, Wolfman, Dracula with Lugosi, and Claude Rains' Invisible Man. Yeah.
Very respectable picks. So to kind of ground things a little bit more in what's happening in contemporary times, at the time of this recording, we're a couple months out from 2 back-to-back high-profile remakes and reboots. We've got the Nosferatu remake coming out in December and the Wolfman remake coming out in January. I want to kind of pick your brain about, in general, when you've seen these monsters brought into modern times and you've seen them rebooted and reimagined, what your general feelings on those are, which ones you feel worked, which ones you feel didn't, and why. So just taking kind of a broader sweep, when these monsters are taken out of the 30s and 40s and reimagined in more modern context, are readapted and taken and given a new twist, how do you generally feel, and what do you think are like the important ingredients in getting it right?
Great question. It's really a fascinating prospect that these monsters are as massive as they are today. And I can't think of anything else from that long ago that is making the wavelengths that it still is. I guess outside of like, Superman, Batman, Nosferatu was 1922. So that's massive leaps. 102 years later, we're getting this official remake. So I am not averted to remakes. A lot of people, it's a discussion that film buffs can argue till the sun comes up. And I am I'm willing to give anything a chance. People are in a tizzy over Lee Whannell's Wolfman because they showed a costume at Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios this year, and it was a guy in a mask, and he looked more of like a grungy old man than anything else, and people lost their flipping minds over this thing. Like, this is what the Wolfman's gonna look like in this movie? Like, are you kidding me? We'll boycott it. We're not gonna go see it. That's trash. And I found it so humorous. Like, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I'm like, look, no one ever made any sort of comment over, is this completely accurate? Is this what it's going to look like? I think Lee Whannell, maybe a month ago, finally came out and said, like, a version of that thing is in our film, but he's like, I promise you it doesn't look anything like the real thing in the movie. But he wouldn't say, is this Chris Abbott's character? Is it, like, he left that quiet, and I'm glad. But people are passionate, and I get people are concerned, and, I think backing up just a little bit, you have The Mummy 1999, and I'd say far and away, that's probably like the most loved, like, official Universal monster remake. And I don't know, like, I mean, it made a crap ton of money when it first hit the box office, but I do feel like, a decade after its release, people weren't quite as warmed up to it. And now, 25 years later, people are just like over the moon for that movie again. Brendan Fraser's big comeback, and like everyone loves The Mummy 1999. And I feel like The Mummy 2017 with Tom Cruise probably did much, much good for The Mummy 99. The remake stuff is interesting. Like, they had announced the Dark Universe stuff, and Javier Bardem was going to be Frankenstein's monster, and Johnny Depp was going to be the Invisible Man, and Nick Morton, who is Tom Cruise's character, was going to kind of be the plot thread that tied it all together. And, they were trying to do what the MCU was doing. And it's just like, look, here's the reason why the classic movies work and why they are so beloved to this day. They're character-driven, story-driven, not bombastic, not, high-budget, sprawling, epic adventures. They're like character studies. They're deeply personal. They focus on the humanity of the situation that every character is in. And that's why they're so terrifying. If you look at it in this realistic light, like, Renfield, that's terrifying what happens to him. Larry Talbot, that's terrifying and awful what happens to him. Frankenstein's monster, it's terrifying and awful what happens to that creature. Like, so it's this deeply personal resonance, and it's so artistically well done back then. I think Hollywood's so focused on big boom, flash bangs. Like, they weren't sure what direction they needed to go in. And for some odd reason, The Mummy 99 worked. And that's the sprawling Indiana Jones-ish, like, action adventure movie. And it works. Like, it's great. But it still kind of it was character driven. And it had the monster, and it worked. And the 2010 Wolfman movie I thought it was okay. Like,
I definitely have thoughts on that one, but
yeah, it's one I need to revisit, and it just came out on 4K, and I just picked up the 4K, so I want to revisit it. I remember being crazy about it. Like, I saw it in theaters twice when it came out in 2010. I think once I got like so obsessed with the Wolfman 1941, I was like, man, like you guys kind of butchered the story. I know you can't really do a shot for shot remake, but I almost feel like a shot for shot remake, like using that whole same cast and crew, Del Toro and Rick Baker, it would have just been a better movie. Like if they just done a shot for shot remake.
I think that one gets too lost in the spectacle.
Yes, I agree. Exactly right. And I think a lot of them, the modern ones, get too lost in the spectacle. So looking at it in a different light, it's not really universal, but I would say reboot, modernization wise, the best thing that has captured the essence of these characters and the tragedy is Penny Dreadful. If you're not familiar with Penny Dreadful, it was this 2014 to 2016 Showtime series. And it's a show that I don't regularly like push on people because it's gruesomely violent and like very sexual. So if people are into like kind of the cleanliness of the Universal monsters, I'm like, don't watch Penny Dreadful. If you can get into like the real darkness and the grit and just the horrificness, Penny Dreadful's amazing. It's my far and away favorite rendition of Frankenstein's monster. But you get Dracula's in there, Renfield's in there, Van Helsing, the Wolfman, the Bride of Frankenstein, like they're all in there. And it's Victorian London, so 1890s. So it has that more regal approach, but it's all character driven and it's focused on what's happening in the lives of these people and these monsters. And it works. It works because it focuses on the things that worked in the classic movies. So I'm looking forward to Nosferatu because Eggers, his films are beautiful and they're haunting. And I think Nosferatu I'm really holding out hope that it kind of pulls that off. I'm looking forward to the Wolfman. Lee Whannell's Invisible Man. It's deeply personal. This woman that's like trapped in this abusive relationship, and it's terrifying. So Lee Whannell's whole approach for the Invisible Man, and he's saying he's doing the same thing with the Wolfman, is like taking the ideas of these characters and like, how do I utilize that in a modern setting? And that abusive relationship is like, hey, he's invisible. That's terrifying. So if you're talking bare bones horror, the one that works the best so far has been The Invisible Man. And people love that movie, and it did great. It was cheap to make, made, great money at the box office. And he's doing the same thing with the Wolfman. I get people's apprehension where it's like, whatever Wolfman we get, it's not going to be Larry Talbot. But I think he's going to capture that tragedy, and it's family. The Wolfman's always a family story. So this new version is a man and wife and his daughter, and he becomes, the Wolfman, and it's going to be terrifying.
So to that end, a thing that I've been thinking about a ton since I've been seeing the trailers for the new Wolfman and since I've been hearing the details about it is, what about this makes this a Wolfman movie as opposed to a werewolf movie? I don't know, because the movie's not out yet, and I don't want to make any judgment calls on it until I see it. But from what I understand of the concept, we know it's not Larry Talbot, so we know that that's not the defining thing. Does it come down to the design? Does it come down to the themes? What is the difference between a Wolfman and a werewolf? Because to me, prior to this, I would have said the Wolfman is Larry Talbot, the way that Dracula is separate from vampires. The Wolfman is the story of a specific, distinct werewolf. With this one not being the case, uprooting the time and setting, changing it to a different character, it's not the person that makes this the Wolfman. So what themes are they hitting on, and what is the DNA that they're pulling from that makes this the Wolfman and not a werewolf?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I love the thought you put into it, because I feel the same way. I feel, the Wolfman, Larry Talbot, he is a werewolf, but he is the Wolfman. You have American Werewolf in London, you have The Howling, and they're all, it's like a coven of werewolves. Like, so, Lycanthrope, it's like Larry Talbot is the Wolfman, and I think a distinction for Lee Whannell's version, it's not called the Wolfman. It's just called Wolfman. So I feel like it's this terminology that you can kind of interchange however you want. People that aren't really well versed as we are, like, into the fandom, like, I feel like anyone could say, oh, he's a Wolfman, or he's a werewolf. Like,
oh, that's a Frankenstein.
Yeah, exactly right. So to me, I feel like prior to really diving deep into this sort of thing, to me, a Wolfman would be a man like on 2 feet who's taken on the characteristics of a wolf, hence Larry Talbot's version. To me, like a werewolf, I'd lean more towards like he's on all fours, takes on far, far more of the wolf qualities. It doesn't really matter. But I feel like Lee Whannell's Wolfman, it's going to be, I think he's just going to maintain more of the man qualities than the wolf. Like, to me, it sounds like this is not going to be a supernatural curse. This is going to be some sort of sickness, some sort of virus.
It definitely looks, from the trailers that they've released, they're sort of equating lycanthropy with almost like a zombie virus kind of take.
Yeah. I halfway wondered, like, when they first showed the costume at Halloween Horror Nights, I was like, oh, are they going to do something where, like, this is some sort of new strain of rabies or something like that? Like, and they could still kind of, go that way, which I'm fine with. Like, that. So that goes back to Lee Whannell talking about, like, how do I modernize these characters and ground them in a more realistic way? Whereas, with the Invisible Man, it was like, it's not this invisibility concoction, it's a suit. So he's doing the same thing. Like, I think this is very much going to be something viral, some sort of sickness, some sort of disease. But it's fascinating to me to think about that, because one thing that I kind of hung on to, I know he mentioned that in an interview, like, it made me think back to House of Dracula. That's the one where Larry Talbot gets cured. This doctor, he starts to cure Dracula. And he's like, your vampirism is a virus and science can cure it. So that was kind of these two worlds, like supernatural and the occult, meeting science. And that was back in 1945. Like, so it was kind of interesting that they're like, all right, we have a scientific answer for your supernatural curse. And I think, that's kind of where they're leaning towards with Wolfman, except I don't think there's going to be any sort of supernatural. I think it's all going to be medical, viral, something like that. But it's a Universal movie. So the Wolfman is universal through and through. The Wolfman and Creature from the Black Lagoon, I'd say, are universals too. We created these characters. They're not based on the novels. So regardless of what you're going to get, if it's a Universal movie, it's like, it's Wolfman because it's Universal. So it's something that we're going to have to wait and see. But I'm looking forward to it.
I will be fully transparent that I am a little skeptical, but I want to give it a fair shake, so I'm trying not to come to any conclusions before I see it. But a big part of it, too, is doing D&Dark. I've really analyzed each of these characters over a long span of time.
Yeah.
So I'm always interested in what the core essence of each one of these guys is and what different adaptations can latch onto. Like, what is the important core DNA that is the through line for these stories that makes them work? Like I brought up before with how Dracula is a very specific vampire story compared to general vampires. Shifting over to Nosferatu, that also brings its own set of assumptions. Even though it's adapted from the same base story, Count Orlok brings an entirely different set of assumptions from Count Dracula. And I think that doing a Nosferatu story now, I think is a very interesting timing, especially because with the visual iconography of both the original and the 70s remake, they really lean into vampirism as a metaphor for being a vector for disease, and that Count Orlok represents plague and pestilence. So doing a plague-based vampire movie on the heels of just coming off of a global pandemic, I think is brilliant timing.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's some interesting commentary to be made there, and I'm definitely really excited to see where that movie goes and where it takes that metaphor. And with Robert Eggers' style, I loved The Lighthouse. I loved the, I'm one of the people that call it the Vavitch, but
I love it. Yep.
I'm very excited to see where that goes. Is there anything that you want to see specifically from the Nosferatu remake that you're looking forward to, or pitfalls that you think that movie should try to avoid?
So, to your point, your stuff, like the whole pestilence plague metaphor, like, the rats. And they even said the makeup Max Schreck wore, it was supposed to evoke this sort of rat-like quality. And, Bram Stoker's Dracula, like the novel, Bela Lugosi is the farthest description of Count Dracula. And the description in the novel, like even Count Orlok isn't quite there, but I'd say Orlok leans more towards the description in the novel than Lugosi's Dracula. And Lugosi's Dracula, it was kind of a product of the plays. Like the play, I think it was 1924 is when it first premiered in London. And he was this regal, count, and it was sexy, and it got women into the seats, and it did, and Lugosi specifically, the women were just going bonkers over Lugosi's Dracula. There was this, exotic European, just this draw, and it worked. So Count Orlok is just this demonic, just bestial, rat-faced fiend, and he's disease and pestilence, like you said. And so they have to lean into that. It's something I hadn't thought about, coming off of the heels of the pandemic. It's yeah, man, that's going to be terrifying in and of itself. It does look like they are still making that kind of Bram Stoker's Dracula, I've crossed oceans of time to be with you. It seems like they are going to lean into that, which is kind of interesting, because we've got Bill Skarsgård playing Count Orlok. I'm sure he's going to be this gross, monstrous, rat-like thing. And so I am interested to see, is it going to kind of lean into that dark romance at all? Because you feel like anyone would just be absolutely disgusted. There's no charm. There's no attractiveness to Count Orlok, unlike Lugosi or Gary Oldman or whoever else. He's just this hideous creature. And I love that they haven't shown him. Much like I love that Lee Wanell hasn't shown off the Wolfman. That's one thing that they kind of share. They're holding their cards close to the chest, where it's like, people are going to want to go see these movies specifically to get the big reveal. So, this version of Nosferatu, you can tell based on the trailer, it's not going to be a shot-for-shot remake, but Robert Eggers has this style that I think is really going to pay dividends to the lore and the story of what Nosferatu is. And the 1922 original, it's still one of the most terrifying films of all time.
It's one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah. When Count Orlok comes up out of the ship and his nails are like 12 inches long and he's just this phantom freak. The 20s just like, they held no punches. It's so alien to what we're used to today. And that's why Nosferatu works. It's that alien quality where it's your brain is like, it can't accept it as reality. And I think that's what Robert Eggers is going to have to pull off.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see both of these movies. I will be excited to see if they do stick the landing. I would love to see a huge resurgence of all of these guys. It goes without saying, since we both dabble in what this content is, I feel like we will only benefit from seeing these properties explode in popularity again.
Oh, I agree. I will say, I won't go down a super deep rabbit hole here, because I could talk about this for ages. I think regarding an adaptation, one that I'm most paying attention to, and there's not a lot out there, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein is coming to Netflix, and I am fascinated by what he's going to do with that.
I know that's been in development forever.
Yeah, it's been ages, and I think he wrapped filming in July or August, so my guess is probably late next year it'll hit Netflix. So I think the big rumor that I've heard with that one, I know he's adapting, it'll be more of Shelley's novel because it's not Universal. But one thing I have heard, it's a rumor, but it sounds like it's pretty true, is Christoph Waltz is playing Dr. Pretorius in that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And that's fascinating to me because it's like Pretorius is a James Whale creation for Bride of Frankenstein specifically. And so that got me really excited because you're taking Shelley's novel and you're taking aspects of Universal's characters. So I'm like, I don't know how they could pull Pretorius. I'd imagine he's got to be copyrighted by Universal. So I'm like, to get something that Ernest Thesiger did and, get somebody like Christoph Waltz potentially to play that role, I'm like, geez, man, that could be bonkers. So it sounds like Del Toro is not shooting, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It sounds like he's taking the bones of that story and pulling stuff from everything that he likes and making his own monster, essentially. We've got James Wan's going to do Creature from the Black Lagoon. I know people were kind of in a tizzy about that too, but I'm like, I think if any of the monsters really do deserve a remake, it's got to be Creature. I mean, a lot of people are like, well, Del Toro did Shape of Water. I'm like, yeah, but I mean, it's not really. It's a spiritual sequel, right? It's not really the Kill Man. So that's one that I'm like, that could be just this claustrophobic, like you could make that movie terrifying. So I'm glad Universal's taking this approach where they're like, okay, well, obviously Tom Cruise's Mummy bombed and, right out of the gate, our promise was, crossover universe and they're all going to come together at one point. And it was just like, well, the first movie just destroyed any hopes of that. So Universal's approach now is like, we're going to focus on one monster at a time and just do it that way. And I'm like, that's a great approach. Just do one at a time.
That's the better way to do it. Mm-hmm. I say as somebody who shoved 5 together.
Right. Which is fine. It's all in your approach and your care. And I'm not going to badmouth any of these creators because I know everybody that takes a chance on making one of these movies, they come from a place of reverence and respect. So did I love The Mummy 2017? No. It just didn't work. And that's okay. If it doesn't work, I'm try again until it works. But it's I really want to see somebody make a black and white 1930s, 1940s stage set monster movie. Just try it. See if it works today. Like, no one's willing to do it because it's such a risk. But look at the fans that just religiously watch the classics over and over and over and never get sick of them. I'm like, there's a massive audience of people that would go watch a black and white 1940s set horror film, I think.
Yeah, I think the closest thing we've gotten to that recently was the Marvel Werewolf by Night short.
Yes.
Which Jordan, who plays the Wolfman in D&Dark, loves that short.
Yeah, it's great.
I had a fun time with it, and it's just the nostalgia of making it primarily black and white. I think there is something to that.
Yeah. I think it's worth, there's some other black and white horror movies, but like I said, I think the thing that makes it work, character driven, personal, emotionally driven, the trappings work no matter what. We've seen that for the decades since, like even in the 80s. Like you get the trappings of any horror movie can be a spooky house or a dark dungeon or Dracula's castle or Frankenstein's lab or the moors, like whatever, like all that works. You know it works. Like it's the bones, like the foundation that you really have to focus on. So yeah, I'm always carefully optimistic. You know, I'll give any of these remakes a chance. Like I wasn't crazy about Renfield. Like I thought it was just it was a comedy. Like I thought it was just okay.
I have mixed feelings about the Renfield movie.
Yeah. Like that's kind of how I was. Like they made the movie that they wanted to make, and some people absolutely loved it. Just wasn't for me. I didn't hate it. You know, it's they're trying the best that they know how. Like I'm no Hollywood producer or director, anything. Like I have no insight into how it works, so I can sit here.
Yeah, it's an absolute miracle that any movie is any good with how many hoops they have to jump through just to get made.
Exactly. I'm not this bastard of a movie fan where it's like, you're messing it up. Like, no, I get like you said, it's a miracle that when we get any sort of news, like they're talking about doing a remake of The Mole People and making it like a straight up in your face visceral horror film. And I'm like, great. Like, that's awesome. And if it sees the light of day, great. And if I go and see it and it sucks, it's like, well, gave it a shot. Oh, well, move on to the next thing. And if it's amazing, that's freaking amazing. So that's kind of the attitude that I try to have with all these. And yeah, there's ways to make it work.
Absolutely. Thank you again for geeking out with me about all this stuff. It's a ton of fun to be able to share with like-minded people the passion for these different kinds of projects. I would like to think that we've achieved the right approach with D&Dark with that kind of character focus. I will fully admit it takes us a minute to find our footing, but I think once we do and once we get going, I'm really proud of the explorations we've been able to have with these unique interpretations on each of these characters, and I hope that resonates with the audience that we have. I know that some of our fans have really latched onto these takes on the characters, so at least from a procedural standpoint, I am attempting and intending to take the approach that you've outlined of focusing on the character drama and the tragedy behind each of them, what makes them compelling characters, what challenges them, and what makes for tense scenarios.
Yeah, I mean that's it, man. Like you've captured it. You know, I joke around with some of my friends that have the other Universal Monster accounts on Instagram and stuff. There's my page, there's Uni Monsters, there's Universal Monsters Universe, and we're all friends. That's been one of the richest interactions with all these guys. Like, it's all camaraderie. There's no competition where, you know, I feel like there's other pages and other accounts that focus on different things. And there's like this competitiveness. And it's like, hey, we're all here because we love the same thing. Why would there ever be competition? We do live streams together, and like we all joke around where it's like Hollywood, Universal. You want somebody to tell you the right way to go with these things? Like, it's us. And we're joking. Like, of course, you know, we're not executives and we have like I said, we have no insight, but we know the lore. And like you said, you know the lore, you understand what makes these characters work. And so your platform is wonderful because it's like you guys have taken the time and the dedication. These characters are part of you. They're part of us. You know, it is a joke, but it's like, hey, Hollywood, Universal, like if you really want to get somebody's insight onto what works and what doesn't, I'm not being arrogant about it, but it's like, hey, we know. And what you guys are doing, you know what makes it work. So like when you first reached out and I kind of looked into what you guys were doing, I was like, how cool is that? Like, I think it's just like this beautiful thing that you guys do. Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for all of that. And thank you again for coming on to chat with me. Before we wrap up, are there any other miscellaneous things that you want to add that we didn't get to touch on?
I don't think so, really. I'll say this. I had the privilege to partner as like a creative influencer and kind of got to push the In Search of Darkness documentaries. Listeners, if you're not familiar with the In Search of Darkness trilogy, the first 3 are out there. I think they're streaming on Shudder. I don't know if you can buy them physically currently, but they're like these 5.5 hour documentaries on 80s horror. If you're into horror at all, like, they are the best documentaries. So they decided after they wrapped the 80s trilogy, the next installment is 1990 to 1994. And I think it'll be out December or January. It was cool. It was a cool opportunity. Not that I wasn't interviewed or anything like that. I just, I got to be like a creative influencer where it was like, I'm pushing it. And I was pushing the documentary and like posting about it on the Universal Monster page. I push them because they cover that era in filmmaking just so, masterfully. They cover it, and there's stuff that you've never heard of. They get, interviews with crew members, cast members, directors. So you just get this kind of firsthand approach. So I know they've confirmed the 90 to 94 one is like 6 hours, and they'll talk about Bram Stoker's Dracula, and they'll talk about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and that 1994 movie with Jack Nicholson and Michelle Pfeiffer, Wolf. So they're going to talk about some Universal monster related stuff, and myself and colleague got to interview David Weiner, who's the director, and that's up on YouTube. He's done a ton of interviews with people recently, so if you want to look up David Weiner and Search of Darkness 90 to 94 interviews, we got to do that. So that was just like a cool little project. And I talked to Dave about potentially, could you foresee a 1930s or 1940s installment? Because outside of the Universal stuff, there's so many creative, amazing, terrifying horror movies in the 30s and 40s. And he was like, look, well, time will tell. Personally, I would love for that to happen, but we kind of wait and see how each installment of In Search of Darkness does, and then we kind of take some time and we'll ask the masses, like, what do you want? He's like, it could be years from now, but maybe one day we will do In Search of Darkness 1930. So we'll have to wait and see, but that was really, really cool. And if you guys are listening to this and want something really, really fun and fascinating to watch, go watch those documentaries. You won't be disappointed.
Can I just have you touch base again real quick on what your projects are, how people can listen to you, and where they can find you?
Absolutely. My main project, obviously, is the Monster Archives. That's the history podcast. It's streaming on, it's pretty much everywhere that you listen to podcasts. I focus on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube. You can get it on Amazon as well. I pretty much exclusively hang out on Instagram. That's just by the luck of the draw. That's like where I started it. And so I'm not on X or Twitter. There's a Facebook page, but I started that like a year and a half ago. So I don't really pay attention to the Facebook page. But yeah, pretty much I live on Instagram at Universal Studios Monsters. My personal account is at Ian the Wolfman. I'm not as exciting on my personal, but if you love the Universal Monsters, like at Universal Studios Monsters is where it's at. And news, scheduling updates, anything regarding the Monster Archives, I post. All of that information is on the Instagram account. I'll let you guys know. The second half of season 2, we've got the Spanish version of Dracula, which is fascinating. It was filmed at night on the same sets, the exact same time as the Lugosi version. Totally different Spanish-speaking cast. It has like this totally different atmosphere. There's some fascinating stuff. You have that to look forward to. And then I get into James Whale. I get into Karloff before Frankenstein. And then the final 2 episodes of season 2 is like this deep dive into the production history of Frankenstein. So just to give you a taste, that's what you have to look forward to with season 2 of the Monster Archives.
All right. I am absolutely excited to dive into all of that. Thank you again for bringing that up. It has been awesome talking with you. So thank you everybody for listening. I've been Danger Dangers. This has been Table Talk, and I hope you enjoyed what we brought to the table. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Table Talk, created, hosted, and edited by myself, Danger Dan Jers, with artwork by Jordan Nelson. Our guest this episode was Ian the Wolfman from the Monster Archives. Links to his show can be found in the episode description. If you're interested in being a guest on this show, reach out to us at dndarkpodcast@gmail.com. Our theme song and outro was created by Jeremy Vellucci. Check out more of his works on Instagram at JeremyVellucci_Wreck of Time. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time we have a guest take a seat at the table.